the car that at the end of the first Fast and Furious, I'm driving in Mexico.
I think Fast has moved from the streets.
It's impossible to receive an award and not feel emotional.
People all the time ask me about the iconic cars in this mythology. When I think of the Dodge Charger, I think of that moment from the first film in the Toretto garage where Dom and Brian.
Vin Diesel has spent most of his life in front of cameras. Millions of people know his voice, his movies, and the characters he has played for more than 2 decades. Audiences around the world recognize him as Dominic Toretto, the quiet, powerful figure who speaks about loyalty and family while driving some of the most iconic cars ever seen on screen. But there has always been one part of his life that remained hidden. Not the films, not the fame, something much more personal. For years, rumors circulated among fans and car enthusiasts about what might exist behind the doors of his private garage. People assumed it would look like the typical celebrity collection, polished supercars lined up like trophies, each one more expensive than the last. But when those doors were finally opened, what people found was something completely different. Yes, there were rare cars. Yes, there were machines worth millions of dollars. But what shocked visitors wasn't just the value of the vehicles. It was the stories attached to them. Some cars inside the garage were connected to the most famous moments of Diesel's career. Others had nothing to do with Hollywood at all. A few were gifts from friends. One was linked to a personal loss that changed the Fast and Furious family forever. And buried among the collection was something almost no one expected. A car so rare that only 7 people on Earth can own it. This wasn't just a garage. It was a timeline. And every engine inside it told a story. But to understand why this collection matters so much, you first have to understand the man who built it. Before the movies, before the fame, before the name Vin Diesel ever appeared on a film poster, there was Mark Sinclair. That is the name Vin Diesel was born with. He entered the world in 1967 in Alameda County, California, before growing up in New York City. His upbringing was far from glamorous. Diesel was raised in a working-class household, surrounded by artists, writers, and theater performers rather than Hollywood executives or racing teams. Cars were not part of his early life. Not yet. In fact, Diesel's early path looked nothing like the future people would eventually associate with him. As a teenager, he became involved in theater and acting through New York's local arts community. Later, in his 20s, he worked as a nightclub bouncer, a job that helped build the tough, intimidating image people now associate with him. But acting was always the goal. The problem was that Hollywood didn't seem interested. For years, Diesel struggled to find roles that fit him. Casting directors often didn't know where to place him. He didn't fit traditional stereotypes for leading men, and many opportunities simply never came. So, he did something unusual. Instead of waiting for the industry to notice him, he decided to create his own opportunity. In 1995, Diesel wrote, directed, produced, and starred in a short film called Multifacial. The project was made with very limited resources, but it caught the attention of filmmaker Steven Spielberg, who later cast Diesel in Saving Private Ryan. That role became a turning point. Suddenly, Hollywood knew who Vin Diesel was. But his true breakthrough came a few years later. In 2001, Diesel starred in a street racing film that no one expected to become a global phenomenon: The Fast and the Furious. The movie introduced audiences to Dominic Toretto, a quiet, fearless street racer who valued loyalty above everything else. At first glance, it looked like a typical action movie: fast cars, high-speed chases, explosions. But Diesel believed the story could be something deeper. As the franchise continued, he became more involved behind the scenes, eventually serving as a producer on later installments. This gave him influence over how the character evolved, and surprisingly, how the cars were chosen. For Diesel, the vehicles were never just props, they were characters. Each one had to represent something. The famous 1970 Dodge Charger RT, for example, wasn't chosen randomly. The car was introduced in the film as the vehicle built by Dominic Toretto's father, turning it into a symbol of legacy and family. That emotional connection helped define the entire series. The Charger's massive engine and aggressive appearance made it unforgettable on screen, but its real purpose was storytelling. It represented heritage, responsibility, and memory. As the franchise expanded through films like Fast 5 and Furious 7, Diesel's influence on the creative direction grew stronger. And with it, his personal connection to cars grew stronger too. Because somewhere along the way, the line between actor and character started to blur. Vin Diesel wasn't just playing Dominic Toretto anymore. He understood him. Both men believed in loyalty. Both valued family above everything else. And both had a deep respect for powerful machines. That connection eventually led to something unexpected. Diesel began building a collection of cars in real life, not as a display of wealth, but as a way of preserving memories tied to different moments in his career and life. Some of the vehicles came directly from film productions. Others were restored classics he personally admired, and a few arrived in the garage for deeply personal reasons. Over time, the collection quietly grew. There was no publicity, no media tours, no social media showcases. The garage remained private for years. But when people finally saw what was inside, they realized something surprising. This wasn't the garage of a celebrity. It was the garage of someone who genuinely loved cars. Not just the speed, not just the appearance, the engineering, the history, the emotion attached to them. For Diesel, every vehicle had a personality. He didn't talk about horsepower the way collectors usually do. He talked about how a car felt, how it handled on the road, what memories were attached to it. Some machines reminded him of early film sets. Others reminded him of friendships formed during the Fast and Furious series. And a few cars carried much heavier memories, the kind connected to moments that changed his life forever. But those stories wouldn't become clear until people finally stepped inside the garage itself. Because what waited inside revealed a completely different side of Vin Diesel. The doors opened slowly. At first glance, the space looked exactly how you might imagine a high-end car collection. Wide floors, rows of vehicles, the faint scent of oil and rubber in the air. But the longer visitors stood there, the more unusual the collection began to feel. This wasn't a showroom. There were no velvet ropes separating guests from the cars. No museum-style displays explaining their value. Instead, the vehicles sat quietly in different corners of the garage, as if they had been parked there after long drives, rather than carefully arranged for exhibition. Noticing something. Each section of the garage seemed to represent a different chapter of Diesel's life. One side contained the legendary muscle cars that fans instantly recognized from the Fast and Furious films. Another side held vehicles that had never appeared in any movie at all. And tucked deeper inside the space were a few machines that very few people had ever seen. One of the first cars visitors noticed was a vehicle that had practically become part of Diesel's identity. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS. Even among classic muscle cars, the Chevelle SS holds legendary status. During its era, Chevrolet produced versions equipped with extremely powerful V8 engines that made the car one of the most feared street machines of its time. On screen, the Chevelle appeared in multiple Fast and Furious films, driven by Dominic Toretto during some of the franchise's most intense racing scenes. But the version inside Diesel's garage wasn't just a movie prop. It had been restored and preserved with extraordinary care. The paint gleamed under the garage lighting. The engine looked meticulously maintained, and the car clearly held special importance to its owner. For Diesel, the Chevelle represented something more than performance. It represented transformation. Because when audiences saw that car tearing down streets in the films, they were also watching Diesel's career reach new heights. But the Chevelle wasn't the only familiar machine inside the garage. Not even close. Because deeper inside the collection sat another vehicle that would immediately send chills through fans of the franchise. The legendary 1970 Dodge Charger. And the story behind that car is even more powerful than most people realize. The deeper visitors moved into Vin Diesel's garage, the clearer it became that this wasn't simply a collection of rare cars. It was a map of memories. Every machine had been chosen for a reason. Some represented important milestones in Diesel's career. Others reflected friendships formed over decades in Hollywood. A few even carried emotional weight, connected to moments that changed his life forever. And the first car that truly captured everyone's attention was the one sitting near the center of the garage, the legendary 1970 Dodge Charger RT. Fans of the Fast and Furious film series know this car instantly. In the movies, the Charger isn't just another muscle car. It's introduced as the vehicle Dominic Toretto's father built himself, making it a symbol of family legacy and responsibility. In the original The Fast and the Furious, the Charger becomes one of the most unforgettable machines ever shown in a street racing film. Its enormous engine, aggressive design, and dark presence made it feel almost mythical. But standing inside Diesel's real garage, the car feels very different. There are no cameras, no stunt drivers, no explosions, just the machine itself. The Charger's history as an American muscle car dates back decades. The 1970 model is widely known for its powerful V8 engines, including the famous 426 Hemi option that produced about 425 horsepower, according to Dodge historical specifications. But the numbers aren't what matter here. For Diesel, the Charger represents something much deeper than performance. It represents legacy, and in many ways, it represents the character that changed his life forever. Because without Dominic Toretto, there might not be a Vin Diesel car collection at all. But what surprised visitors most was not the movie cars. It was the vehicles that had never appeared in a single scene. Tucked along the far side of the garage were cars that had no connection to film productions or publicity. These machines were chosen quietly over the years, simply because Diesel admired them. One of those cars was a 1993 Mazda RX-7. For people unfamiliar with automotive history, the RX-7 might seem like an unusual choice next to massive American muscle cars. But among car enthusiasts, the third-generation RX-7 is considered one of the most respected performance cars of the 1990s. The car used Mazda's famous twin-turbo rotary engine, known as the 13B REW. Unlike traditional piston engines, rotary engines use a spinning triangular rotor to generate power. This design allowed the RX-7 to produce impressive performance while remaining relatively lightweight. According to Mazda technical specifications, the FD generation RX-7 produced roughly 255 horsepower and became known for its near-perfect weight balance and precise handling. In other words, it was built for control rather than brute strength. And that difference reveals something interesting about Diesel's taste in cars. Despite his on-screen image as a muscle car driver, he clearly respects many different types of automotive engineering. Power, balance, precision. Each represents a different philosophy of performance, and Diesel seems to appreciate them all. But perhaps the most unexpected vehicle inside the garage wasn't fast at all. It was a van. Parked quietly along one wall sat a customized Mercedes-Benz Sprinter. At first glance, it looked completely out of place among the sports cars and muscle machines. But this vehicle carried a story, that made it one of the most meaningful in the entire collection. The van was reportedly gifted to Diesel by his longtime co-star, Tyrese Gibson, who joined the Fast and Furious franchise in Too Fast, Too Furious. Unlike the other vehicles in the garage, the Sprinter was designed for comfort rather than speed. It was equipped with lounge seating, entertainment screens, and other features that made it useful during long filming schedules. In Hollywood, where filming days can stretch for hours, a comfortable place to rest between scenes can be invaluable. But the real importance of the van wasn't its design. Because gifts between cast members often represent the kind of friendships formed during years of working together. And the Fast and Furious cast has often described their relationship as something closer to a family than a group of coworkers. That idea, family, has always been central to the franchise. But one car in Diesel's garage reminds everyone why that word became so important. Before reaching that emotional moment, however, visitors encounter something completely different. A car that looks like it belongs in the future. Parked deeper inside the garage is one of the rarest vehicles in the entire automotive world, the Lykan Hypersport. The car was created by the Lebanese automotive company W Motors and officially introduced in 2013. What makes the Lykan Hypersport so extraordinary is its rarity. Only 7 units were ever produced worldwide. That means ownership of the vehicle is limited to an extremely small group of collectors. The hypercar gained global attention after appearing in Furious 7 during a famous scene where the car jumps between skyscrapers in Abu Dhabi. In real life, the Lykan Hypersport is even more extravagant than its on-screen appearance suggests. Its headlights contain embedded diamonds, and the vehicle originally carried a price tag of around $3.4 million, according to official announcements from W Motors. With performance, rarity, and design combined, the Lykan is considered one of the most exclusive cars ever built. And yet, surprisingly, it's not the most meaningful vehicle in Diesel's garage. Because one car inside the collection carries a story that goes far beyond performance. Near the back of the garage sits a vehicle that might not look as dramatic as the hypercars or muscle legends. But for fans of the Fast, Furious franchise, it holds enormous emotional significance. A Toyota Supra. To most people, it's simply a respected sports car known for its performance and tuning potential. But to fans of the franchise, the Supra is closely tied to Diesel's longtime friend and co-star, Paul Walker. Walker played Brian O'Connor throughout much of the series and became one of its most beloved figures. In 2013, Walker tragically died in a car crash in California, an event widely reported around the world and officially documented as the death of Paul Walker. His death deeply affected the cast and crew of the Fast and Furious franchise. Furious films. For Diesel, the loss was personal. The two actors had worked together for more than a decade, and Diesel often described Walker as a brother. That connection made certain vehicles associated with the franchise take on new meaning. The cars were no longer just part of a movie series. They were reminders of the people who helped create it. And inside the quiet space of Diesel's garage, those memories remain preserved. By the time visitors finish walking through the garage, the realization becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't a display of wealth. It's a story. Each car represents a different chapter in Vin Diesel's life. The struggle before Hollywood success, the rise of the Fast and Furious franchise, the friendships formed along the way, and the moments of loss that changed everything. When the engines are silent and the cameras are gone, what remains isn't horsepower, it's memory. And in Vin Diesel's garage, every machine tells a part of that story. Because in the end, the most shocking thing people discovered inside wasn't the rarest car, it was the meaning behind them.